Happy 2015. Every year in the new year, we make New Year's resolutions. But instead of focusing on what you will change and your resolutions that you will make, let's focus this year on the resolutions that God makes to us. Draw near to Him, the one who does not let us down, the one that keeps His word, the one that always, since the beginning of time, has resolved to be faithful to you. Let's focus this sermon series as you pay attention to He is resolved this coming year.
So wouldn't it be exciting if we had a resolution that had the strength of God behind it? And what I would like to do this morning is to be able to start out with a passage that talks about that strength that God has for us. And I'd like to go to a passage in Hebrews. And it will be Hebrews 13, 5 through 6. Hebrews 13, 5 through 6 that you see up on your screen. And it says, "Keep your lives free from the love of money, and be content with what you have, because God has said, 'Never will I leave you, and never will I forsake you.' So we say with confidence, 'The Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me?'" And so you can see from this passage that God is with you. God is behind you. God will be supporting you. So in your New Year's resolutions, if you pray to God to be with you as you try to accomplish them, if your New Year's resolutions is based on what the Bible says, then it will be an exciting year, and your resolutions will not die. And if for some reason you go against them for a short period of time, God will be there to lift you back up and get you back on them again. So if your New Year's resolution is to read the Bible from cover to cover, there may be some times during the year where you don't spend too much time in the Bible, but God will help you move forward in being able to take care of that resolution for the year. So God has that power that will be able to do that. And so this morning, what I would like to do is to tell you a story. For those of you who know me, you know that I'm heavy into stories. I like to talk about stories, but this story comes from the Bible. Something that we have talked a lot about in our power groups is to be able to understand what this Bible is all about. Some of us would like to be able, when we speak with others who don't know what the Bible is about, is to be able to explain what it is. And often when we read the Bible and we read one small passage, we speak on that passage. You may be familiar with that passage. You may talk to somebody about that passage, but you don't really know how it all fits within the Bible. And so this morning, I want to tell you a little bit of a story. And it goes back a long ways in the Bible, but it gives you an idea as to what's going on. And this story began with Abraham. See, Abraham in many ways was what you can call the father of the Israelite nation. And God used the Israelite nation to be able at some point in time to have Jesus be born where He could live His life on earth, where He could then die, be resurrected, and gone back to heaven again. And so God started near the beginning of the Bible creating this nation for that purpose. And Abraham was one of the first people that God used in developing that nation. And so I would like to read from Genesis. And it is about Abraham, and it comes from Genesis 12, beginning at verse 1. "And the Lord said to Abram, 'Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the people on the earth will be blessed through you.' So if you think about Abraham, Abraham was in his home with his family, taking care of all his cattle, and he was a rather wealthy person. His family was rather wealthy, and he had probably all the comforts of life during that period of time. And God came to him while he was at home and said, Abraham, I am going to use you to do something very, very special. I want you to move. I want you to take everything that you have. I want you to completely leave your town. I want to completely leave your extended family. I want you to completely leave everything that is familiar to you. And I want you to go around this land all the way to the other side of the sea and be able to move into a land that I will show you. And can you guess what Abraham might have felt about that? But then God said, you know what, Abraham? I'm going to make you into this huge nation, this great nation. There's going to be all these wonderful people that are going to come from you. And farther into Genesis, you will hear God tell Abraham, you know, kings will come from you, and strong and mighty people will come from you. And there will be all these people in this huge nation. And now I can see Abraham getting fired up and saying, this is cool. This great nation is going to be coming from me. I'm only 75 years old. I'm young yet. And so I'm going to go over there and I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to create this great nation. And so him and his wife and a lot of other belongings that he had went and moved to what they called the land of Canaan. And that's where he lived. And so he was excited about starting this family. But you know what? He couldn't have any kids. And he tried and he couldn't have any kids. Year after year after year, they tried to have kids and they couldn't have any kids. And he was wondering, this promise that God gave me, this resolution that I was going to accomplish as fast as possible, suddenly doesn't seem like it's going to take place. And I can't have any kids. And how am I going to have this great nation if I'm not going to have any kids? But what does Hebrews tell you? What does Hebrews say? There is a gold nugget in every passage that we read. And the gold nugget in this passage is, never will I leave you and never will I forsake you. Think about your resolutions through the year. And every time you said your resolution, if you added to the end of that, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you, you will know that God is going to be behind anything that you do that abides in his will. And so Abraham, in many ways, was forgetting that God was going to be with him, that God wasn't forsaking him, that God had a promise, that God was going to fulfill that promise, but he kept trying to have kids. So now he becomes 99 years old. And he was sort of under the impression that when you're 99 years old, you're not going to have any kids anymore. And so he was pretty upset about that. And he felt really, really bad about that. But you know what happened? At the age of 99, he had a son. And when Abraham died, he had one son that was part of that genealogy that would someday reach to Jesus. He had one son that was going to be used to build up that great Israelite nation. God was with him. God didn't forsake him. It just looked different than what he thought it was going to look. So what happened after we go down a few generations? When we go down a few generations, we come up to a man by the name of Jacob. And Jacob had more than just one kid. Pretty soon his family was about 70 people. And they ended up having a famine in the land which Abraham had gone to, and which the Israelite nation was developing. This Israelite nation, this huge nation that they had promised Abraham and had promised his son Isaac, and now had promised Jacob, that was going to take place, existed of 70 people. And so this famine took place. The 70 people had to move to a place where there was some food, so they moved to Egypt. And what happened in Egypt? What happened in Egypt is those 70 people, and as they grew into a greater family, ended up at some point in time becoming slaves to the Egyptians. And that ended up building into a bigger and bigger nation. About 400 years took place, and those 70 people, or that one person from Abraham, the 70 people from Jacob, grew into a nation of hundreds of thousands of people. And they all were slaves in Egypt. So God ended up having a man who was born by the name of Moses. And Moses one time met God out on this big mountain. And when he met God on this big mountain, he found out something that he was going to do. See, God told Moses, you know what you're going to do, Moses? You're going to go into the land of Egypt, and you're going to take the Israelites, and you're going to move the Israelites, and you're going to move them out to the land of Canaan, where Abraham actually began his whole time. And that is what God wanted to do. And that was the desire God had to Moses. But do you know what Moses thought? Let's take a look in a passage in Exodus. Exodus 3:11 through 12. And this is God speaking with Moses. They're having a conversation. And Moses is scared. How can I do something like this? But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. And this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. So the mountain in which Moses was on at the time, speaking with God, is the mountain that the Israelites would worship on at some point in time when they came out of Egypt. See, Moses didn't think that he had any ability to be able to do something like that. He said that he couldn't speak very well. He said he wasn't much of a leader of a people. And then he just pleaded with God, please don't make me do this. But God said, never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. It's the same little verse that you need to think about all the time as you're living your life in 2015. Never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. That's what God's desire is for each one of you. So to continue the story, and what happened is Moses, through a whole bunch of events, and hopefully we'll preach on all of these stories throughout the years to be able to get you to understand how all these stories fit so beautifully within this Bible. Stories which show the whole route that happened from generation to generation to the birth of Jesus. And so God, in a very mighty way, had all the Israelites leave Egypt. He defeated the pharaohs. He had a lot of plagues that went through the land of Egypt. And pretty soon the Pharaoh said, no, I want all of you people to leave. All the Israelites, I want you to leave. I want you to just leave and be done with us so we don't have these plagues anymore. And so Moses was there, and Moses led the Israelites out into the desert. And where were they going? They were on their way to the land of Canaan, the place where Abraham had originally lived. And so here they are in the desert, and they're feeling great, and they're singing songs, and they're just rejoicing and praising God, and they're walking through the sand, and they come up to the Red Sea, and pretty soon something a little nervous might have taken place. And that is, the Pharaoh changed his mind. He thought, I had all these Israelites as slaves for all these years, and they were building all these buildings, and they were building all these great cities, and now I don't have slaves anymore that can go ahead and take care of all of this. And so he changed his mind, and he went back out into the desert to chase down the Israelites, who were at that time 600,000 men or more. There were probably over 1 million people, and they were all walking through the desert. And so the Pharaoh went and chased down these Israelites. And what happened to these Israelites? What did they say? From Exodus 14:10 through 12. They said, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up. And there were the Egyptians marching after them. And they were terrified, and they cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there was no graves in Egypt that you brought us out to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die here in the desert. There was something that they forgot. What was it that they forgot? What is it that they don't seem to remember that seemed to be happening over and over and over in the life of the Israelites? It's what's up on the screen here. Never will I leave you, and never will I forsake you. Imagine this a little bit. Imagine that all the Israelites walking out of the land of Egypt, and they have this huge pillar of cloud that is leading them through the desert, which is God in that cloud. And at night it's a fiery cloud, and that cloud is leading them out of the land of Egypt. How in the world can you even consider that God isn't with you when He's there and He's visible? And that's what I've often wondered when I've read those stories. But you always have to remember, God will always be with you. He will always be there. And so suddenly God opens up the Red Sea, and they cross the Red Sea on dry ground. All these people and all the Pharaoh's forces thought, we're going to do the same thing. So they went through the Red Sea, and the water caved in on top of them and killed the army of the Pharaoh. And Egypt was no longer an issue to the Israelites. So the Israelites are all happy, and they're all thrilled, and they're singing, and they're rejoicing, and they're praising God, and they're marching through the desert. And now the next event occurs in their life. And it is just like our lives. It's the lives that we lead. We're excited one day because things seem to be going so well. And then a little bit later, something seems to go wrong. And then our emotions are challenged. Our faith is challenged. And there are things that we forget. So let's read what it is that happened for the Israelites. And it comes from Exodus, and it is about being at a well and a lack of water. And Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert of Shur. For 3 days they traveled the desert without finding water. And when they came to Marah, they could not drink its water because it was bitter. That's why the place is called Marah. And so the people grumbled against Moses, saying, what are we to drink? And then Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood, and he threw it into the water, and the water became fit to drink. And there the Lord issued a ruling and instruction for them and put them to the test. And so here was another test. Here was another issue that the Israelites had to go through. And what happened? What is it that they had forgotten? What little bit of statement that we keep repeating in this wonderful passage did they forget? It's never will I leave you, and never will I forsake you. So what ends up happening is now the Israelites have all this water to drink. And they're happy again. The bitter water turned into sweet water. And now they can drink. Why do we keep forgetting that? Why do we keep forgetting that God will be with us? That God will never forsake us? It's just something that we continue to forget. And so the Israelites again are marching through the desert, and they're all happy, and they're singing praises, and things are absolutely wonderful. And now they're getting hungry. And they're wondering, where is this manna, this food, which was ultimately called manna, come from? How is God going to feed 1 million or more people out in a desert where there's no food? So let's take a look at that passage. The passage where we talk about how God solved that issue for them also. And the whole Israelite community set out from Elim, and they came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and the Sinai. And on the 15th day of the 2nd month after they had come out of Egypt, in the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. And the Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat, and we ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve the entire assembly to death. See, the Israelites had all this food with them, what they had brought from the Egyptians. When they left, the Egyptians didn't want anything to do with them, and so they said, here, take everything that we have. And the Israelites did that. The Israelites took all the food and everything from the Egyptians. So they had food supplies for a period of time, and those food supplies were starting to diminish. And so they right away cried and said, what are we going to do? Die here in the desert? What happened when they tried to escape from Egypt? What happened when they needed water? Now, what do they think is going to happen now that they need food? But they keep forgetting. They keep forgetting all the time about what God can do. So when we read this, it says, then the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you, and the people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. And in this day I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. Manna, food came from the sky. It took care of their issues. Again, What is that nugget? That little bit of promise that God keeps giving the Israelites, that they keep forgetting day after day after day. Never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. I bet you by the time this message is done, you're going to know what the title of the message is, aren't you? Because I keep repeating that statement over and over and over. So when you go to bed at night and you're trying to get to sleep, you're going to hear this going through your head over and over and over again because you've heard it so much today. But it's something that's very exciting to me to be able to see how God can take this story of generations of people and show continuously that never will He leave you, never will He forsake you. And so the Israelites go through the desert a little bit farther. And they end up with another issue. And it's another water issue. And Moses, by this time, is saying, come on, people. Don't you understand? Don't you realize that all your issues up to this point has been handled by God? A God that you can see, that is in a cloud and in a fiery cloud at night, that you see on a daily basis, keeps answering your prayers, keeps doing what you want, keeps helping you in every way. And yet you continue to grumble and complain. Don't you think God is going to help you? So let's go to the next passage. And in this passage, we're going to talk about again is going to be a water issue. And the whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. And they camped at Rephidim. And there was no water for the people to drink. And so they quarreled with Moses and said, give us water to drink. And Moses replied, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test? But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses, and they said, why did you bring us out of Egypt to make us, our children and livestock, die here of thirst? Then Moses cried out to the Lord, what am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me. And the Lord answered Moses, go out in front of the people, and take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff in which you struck the Nile, and go. And I will stand before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock and the water will come out for it for the people to drink. And so Moses did this in the sight of the elders of the Israelites. And so the elders of Israel were there and they witnessed what it was that Moses did. And again, they went and their issues were solved. This is all as they are walking through the desert, as they are coming closer and closer to the land of Canaan. And they are just literally forgetting about what God has said to us in Hebrews. Never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. And we go to one more passage, which I'd like to read this morning about the life of the Israelites. And it goes as this. That night all the members of the community raised their voice and wept aloud. If only we had died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and our children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to each other, we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. That's how upset they were, because they were now walking into the land of Canaan. See, the Bible is such a beautiful book. And again, if I didn't mention it this week, as I mention every single week, people would wonder if I had forgotten. But the Bible to me is a puzzle. And in each piece of that puzzle is a story within the Bible. And all those stories connect together in such a way that it leads from generation to generation, from the development of the Israelites, whether their slavery in Egypt, to their freedom in the land of Canaan, and through the kings and queens of that period of time, to the time when Jesus was born, to the time when Jesus lived, to the time that Jesus died, to the time that He raised from the grave. All these pieces fit together. And so they're grumbling again, but God is leading them into the land of Canaan. Remember the promise that God gave Abraham 1,000 years before? And that was that the Israelites were going to become a great nation. In fact, in other places in Genesis, it said that they would be so great, it would be like the sand in the seashore. It would be like the stars in the sky. There would be so many. When they walked into the land of Canaan, there were over 3 million people. God kept His promise. God kept His promise. So what Abraham's resolution, or New Year's resolution, could be that I'm going to work with God in order to create this incredible nation. And that's what he did during his lifetime. And it didn't look the way that he expected because he only had one son. But God's promises hold true. Look what ended up happening. 3 million people walked out of slavery and into the land of Canaan. He kept his promise. And that's what we look at our resolutions today. And we're going to talk about these resolutions each week for the next few weeks. Different kind of resolutions and how we can look at them in different ways by looking up different passages through the Bible. See, what we want to do with this Bible is to make sure that people learn it and they understand it and they learn how the wonderful puzzle pieces all fit together into this beautiful story. So this morning, I want to leave you with 3 thoughts. And first of all, I would like to reread the passage again, if I could, Rudy. I would like to read this passage one more time that we started out with Hebrews. And Hebrews says, keep your lives free from the love of money because God sees how that becomes such an issue in our life. And be content with what you have. Look at the Israelites. They didn't have much, but they should have been content with what they had because God was always with them. Because God has said, never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. So we say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? And so God is on my side. If my resolution is based on the promises of God, like Abraham's resolution was based on the promises of God, it's going to happen. And if we pray to God to find out what we should be doing in this next year and pray to God to help us and to accomplish what's going to happen this coming year, then God is going to help us with all of that. So 3 things I would like you to remember for this upcoming year and 2015. Detach from things and attach to God. There's so much of our time and so much of our energy is based on the accumulation of things. We want to have a house, then we want to have a bigger house, and we want to have a car, and then we want to have a bigger car, and then we want to have a truck, and we want to have a bigger truck, and so on and so forth. And we want to purchase more things in stores and fill our house with more junk. But that junk is not going to make us happy. Detach from material possessions and reattach and attach yourself to the things of God. The next one is going to be a really hard one to chew, but it goes closely with what Hebrews says and closely to what we're talking about this morning. Number 2 says, embrace simplicity. Live with less than you can afford. And I have a wonderful wife, and she has a tendency to like to put these signs on the walls. And I'm not so sure all the time if she's doing that just because they're cool sayings or she's trying to send me quiet messages here and there. You never know what wives are up to, but she could be doing some of that. But a lot of the things that she puts up on the walls deal with simplicity, living life in a simple manner. And we forget about that sometimes. How much more joyful our lives would be if we didn't fill it with things and we didn't try to get to this next level of house ownership or this next level of car. Maybe you can't own that cherry red Corvette with the black top, which I think about occasionally. You might not want to live with that. Maybe you have to live with a lime green Ford. I just don't look so high to something you can't afford. Live life simple, and life will be so much more full of joy. But the last thing that I want to say this morning, the very last thing, is trust God's promise. What is God's promise? What have I been saying over and over and over and over again this morning? He will not forsake you. He will always be with you. He says, never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. Focus your New Year's resolutions on the Bible. And remember that God will be with you. Shall we pray? Lord, I thank you that we can be here this morning. And we can take a look into the year 2015 and take a look at our New Year's resolutions and determine, are those New Year's resolutions from you? Have we prayed about them? Have we found encouragement for them in the Bible? And Lord, when we feel strong that that's where you want us to go, that's where you want us to lead us, then we will always know that you will never forsake us, that you will always be with us. And there will be times, Lord, that during the year, we will not be able to feel as though we're accomplishing the things that we want to accomplish. And for reasons, we'll feel as though we're a bit of a distance from you. But Lord, may we always come back to you because of that wonderful, beautiful nugget that you placed within Hebrews that tells us that you will never leave us, that you will never forsake us. You will always be there, Lord. And so, Lord, may we live with that confidence. May we live with that excitement. May we leave this morning with a big smile on our face. In Jesus' name, amen.